Hey, Think Tankers. So I wanted to do a quick video. I know I had a value selling video. One of the things that I wanted to do is talk about the mistake producers make selling value. And at the same time, I want to help agents understand how to manage and notice if your staff are actually selling value properly or not. If you have the right tools in place, it's extremely easy to manage. And this happens on a monthly basis in my office. I would say that my producers are not perfect. I have a new producer who's doing extremely well because she's doing everything that I'm asking her, but we all have those producers, staff members that we have to continually remind. And so I'm going to show you a real life example of how that's working out in my office. So this is the top mistakes producers make when trying to sell value. Value sales starts from the minute the prospect says hello. So a big mistake, if I were to pick my top producer versus my lower producer, the difference between the two, if I listen to their conversations with clients, is my top producer, in that opening conversation, they begin to build value around themselves and the agency. They want to make sure the client knows that they're not here just to be an order taker. So they'll say things like, you know, something we do a little different is I like to compare coverages so you can really see if you're getting a better value or not. That's important to you, right? Getting a better value. Well, yeah, I want to save money too, sure. But I want to make sure that we are, doing right by you and getting you the best value that we can. And so that builds in the consumer's mind that you are valuable to them. They feel like you want to help them, right? And so what we do is then make use of technology like texting to get declaration pages. You want to make it very convenient for the consumer. And so my really good producer will say things like, hey, do you happen to have your declaration pages on your auto and home insurance near you or anywhere around you that you might have access to it, like online? The other things that the producers don't do properly is they do not find out what the prospect, values by listening and using open-ended questions. Do they have family? Are they self-employed? What do they do for a living? Do they have children? Do they have any recreational vehicles, right? So you need to find out from the consumer who they are, what they do, what do they find value in, because that's going to do a couple of things. One, obvious cross-selling opportunities, right? But too many times I've listened to conversations where I've been in an agent's office and their rock star so-and-so called producer. I heard auto home, no other things mentioned, no open-ended questions. And when I mentioned that to the agent was kind of oblivious that even was happening, right? Well, there's a reason why you're not selling umbrellas. There's a reason why you're not selling life. There's a reason why you're not selling commercial. It's because the conversations that your staff are having, they're not aware of the day-to-day grind that they get sucked into, and they're not truly caring to open up conversations in order to find other bits of information to cross-sell, or they're not using that information during the selling process. For example, if I find out that I have a consumer whose kids ride four-wheelers on their property, that's a huge liability issue. Especially if they have money, you need to have a large umbrella policy, right? Or I had an instance where somebody was driving their golf cart on the street because they lived in a rural area, but they were letting their kids drive the golf cart on the street. That's a huge problem. Lots of liability issues there. And consumers don't know that, right? So being able to open up the conversation from the minute that client says hello and build value upon yourself and your agency, find out how you can get that declaration page to do a side-by-side comparison, and then find out what they value, because that will open up opportunity for you. Now, top mistakes I see when trying to sell value is that side-by-side comparison. Why that's so important, please stop sending just only your quote, especially because most of you, I would say almost 90% of the time easily, whenever you're quoting in your auto insurance carrier, they're going to show you their prior insurance. So the carrier, when you're quoting, will show you the prior insurance for that consumer. You can do a value sales approach on auto every single time that happens. Every time you get prior, you should be doing a side-by-side auto value comparison. If you're not, I need you to think about something. If you pitch 10 consumers auto insurance, how many of those 10 people would understand what 100, 350 means and how it's going to pay out in the case of an accident? How many do you think out of 10? Maybe 1? Yeah. And so now think about yourself. Whenever you're trying to make a decision, let's say you're trying to book a trip, you're booking a hotel somewhere. Don't you look and see don't you compare things? Like, hey, is this a 3-star or a 4-star? Is this 150 or is this 200? What's the difference? I'd rather pay 200 for a 5-star. The consumer does that too, but if you are only selling, or if you're only sending over your quote, all the consumer's going to do is look at price, because they don't understand coverage. And they don't want to understand, really. They don't care initially about 100, 300 if they had 30, 60. Okay, they just don't. And you can't expect them to care or to change, right? Consumers are very fast-paced. They want it now. Just tell me what the price is. I'll pay for it. Let's go. It better be cheaper. No, because when you build out that side-by-side comparison, if you're more expensive, you better have a very visible reason why, and they need to be looking at it at the exact same time you are, so that you can educate the consumer on that value of that product, right? So one thing that also I see producers doing is really educating the consumer on the product, but that's not what you should be doing. You need to be educating the consumer on the difference in value they are getting, okay? And then, why do they need it? Don't go into, if you have, don't go into glass buyback deductible. Don't go into towing. Don't go into rental car. Don't go into vanishing deductible. Don't go into life indemnity death. Don't go into any of these extra products if you have a value approach in liability. If they have a low liability limit, then it's imperative that you start with the difference in the value that they're getting around that liability coverage, and then talk to them about, hey, if little Susie, gets into a car accident and the person she hits is in a minivan with children that flies off the side of the highway, because we don't get to control what kind of, what happens in an accident, and you have 30, 60, 25, don't you think $30,000 is going to go pretty fast in an accident? Don't you think you're going to get sued? There's a lot of tough, smart hammer lawyers out there that are going to sue you. So you're not building an apples to apples comparison, and you're building in that value of, hey, would you rather pay $1 for 1 apple or $1.20 for 10 apples? Well, 10, exactly. So it's very easy to sell value only if the presentation is there for the client to understand what you're trying to sell them, because they don't even know what it is in the first place. So let me show you a real life example from an agent's perspective who is managing this process. You're looking at my dashboard on my agency MVP account. If I scroll down here to my producer, Kim is a newer producer, and she listens really well on what I'm telling people to do in my office, and I train really well. It's, hey, I want you to uncover the declaration pages on everyone, figure out what they're paying, I want you to figure out the coverages that they have, and I want you to use open-ended questions to uncover other opportunities. Until you'll notice all of the different personal lines of business, she is getting a ton of multi-line opportunity quotes and closing a solid amount of those quotes, right? And eventually you'll run into people you're more expensive on. If I go into this quote comparison for this person, so this is the quote we text or email to the prospect. Immediately the prospect can tell that they're getting $320,000 more in coverage. And this is a Geico policy. And look, we have a single person with a truck and one of those Can-Ams. Hopefully everybody knows what a 2015 Can-Am is. So somebody who probably doesn't care much or know much about insurance because they went through Geico, state minimum liability limits. But this is a single person that owns 2 vehicles. Guess what, Jeffrey? If you get into a serious accident and you exceed your $60,000 limits, they're going to sue you personally. And you are going to have to sell one of those vehicles, which is your little pride and joy maybe, the Can-Am. Do you want to have to do that? Or did you not know what that was? Did Geico not take the time to tell you that you had state minimum liability? Did they not take the time to tell you what those liability limits mean? This is why we recommend 100, 300 in these instances. You have $25,000 in property damage. That wouldn't even cover, a multi-car collision or a newer car, right? Hey, by the way, in a Can-Am, if you get into an accident, you might have some problems with medical coverage. Let's give you $5,000 in medical benefit because Jeffrey ended up having health insurance with a high deductible, right? So we talked about health insurance, figuring out their needs and building a value presentation to address that. So we don't, obviously, if we did apples to apples without medical, we could have probably saved them maybe 50, 60 bucks. But why? Sell what they really need on value, and it doesn't matter if you're more expensive. Now, granted, there is a caveat to that. If you're $1,000 more expensive, it's probably because your carrier is just not competitive. But it's the fact that Kim is doing so amazing is because she's listening to the conversations. She's building out value presentations, right? And so things like where we're $200, $300, $400 more expensive, we'll get around to selling that person. This person has a claim that's causing rates to go a little bit higher, and so it'll probably fall off in the future, right? Here's another example where they were a little bit more expensive, but I guarantee you, if I go into this quote comparison, a lot more value was added. Same almost kind of, this is a huge difference. Where I bet you if we sold apples to apples, we could have been a lot cheaper instead of us being, $270 more expensive. The consumer now understands what they're getting and why they need it. That's how but they are looking at this while my producer is talking to them. My producer is never allowed to text or email this quote to the consumer unless they are on the phone with them at that exact moment. Period, end of story. Because what will happen is the consumer will look at this and then they'll scroll their eyes down and see premium, come over here, and they might get turned off because I didn't get the opportunity to educate them on why they need this coverage, why that's so important to them, right? And so value selling using the right tools is critical. So I want to show you my other producer, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan is a decent producer. The only problem is that he goes into stretches of forgetting about value selling, forgetting to ask open-ended questions, and he's just one of those people that I have to continually remind. And so I want to show you what his looks like. So here's Kim's again versus Jonathan's. So a lot of producers tell me, and I hear it all the time, Todd, there's just, I want to cross-sell. I'm asking a ton of questions. Do you think that's a coincidence that he has so many just auto and home, and Kim is having more success, and she has so many other opportunities? Life insurance, cross-selling umbrella, specialty quotes. That is not a coincidence. The reason why she's cross-selling so much is because she's actually having value conversations and uncovering needs while they're on the phone with the prospect, right? And there's stretches. Here's a stretch where I had to have a one-on-one conversation with him, where you'll notice tons of just auto and home, did not find out what they were paying, did not get their current declaration pages, was not really sending out maybe just a couple of times the quote comparison. So you can just see the quality of the value conversations were not happening with him versus were happening with Kim. And that's what makes or breaks the difference between somebody who's going to be amazing as a producer or somebody who's mediocre that you continually have to manage and coach. So that's the difference in really making sure you're value selling or not, and the mistakes that are making, and how to manage and watch. Use a tool like Agency MVP or any other tool that you have out there where you can clearly see what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, so you as the agent can identify issues quickly and go from there. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. If you want to learn more about my sales tool here, agencymvp.com, just go there, agencymvp.com again, click on demo in the top and go at it. If you wanted to set up a demo, definitely you can use this chat now feature here at the bottom of our website to get a hold of us. And if you have any questions, love to hear from you.